Marangiaria, Nadu, Yinjamara, Eora Main, Gadigal Nurubang. In my language, I want to pay respects to the Eora people and the land of the Gadigal people on whose land we meet tonight. Well, the rich getting richer, the poor going backwards. Many Australians are struggling to find a home. Interest rate hikes are hitting middle-income families. The Treasurer boasts that the budget is back in the black, but households are in the red. It's a tough time to be a Treasurer, and he is here tonight to answer your questions. Please welcome Jim Chalmers. And with 400,000 new migrants, where will they live? Thank you for that welcome. I'm Stan Grant. Now remember, you can live stream us around the country on iView and all the socials. Quanda is the hashtag. I know you're going to get involved. So to get us started tonight, we have a question from Davin De Bruin.
Good evening, Mr. Chalmers. You have two mortgages, from what we understand, and I'm keen to know what personal sacrifices have you had to make since the interest rates have increased? Secondly, what should people with mortgages be asking their banks in regards to support? And keen to know what you have personally asked yours.
Well, thanks very much, Davin, and thanks everybody for the opportunity to speak with you again about the second budget of the Albanese government.
Came around quickly, didn't it?
It did, two in the first 12 months of the government. I know that rising interest rates are a big part of the cost of living pressures that people are confronting. I'm obviously not going to go into kind of my own circumstances, and that's because my focus is on the pressure that the broader Australian community is under. Interest rates are part of that. We know that rents have been difficult, energy costs, the cost of living more broadly. When it comes to people's relationship with their banks, I would encourage people, if they're under pressure, to talk with their banks about that. A number of them do have not just hardship provisions if things get incredibly tough, but a lot of people have been able to secure better deals from their banks if they ask for them to prevent you from switching to other competitors. So people who are under pressure could try that avenue, but I understand that that's only one part of the story, and that's why the budget was so focused on the number one challenge that we have in our economy right now, which is the cost of living.
You don't want to go into detail. I'm not going to go into personal financial detail, but are you feeling it? 10 interest rate rises, is that starting to put a squeeze on even on your own budget?
Well, again, Stan, I mean, thank you, but the job of the Treasurer isn't to focus on their own financial situation, it's to focus on your financial situation.
But it is to empathise, isn't it? And to know that even in your situation, if you've had 10 interest rate rises and you're carrying two mortgages, there must be a hit.
Well, I do understand that people are under the pump. And really the chief motivation for the budget that we handed down 6 nights ago was to try and take some of the edge off these cost of living pressures without adding to inflation and making the job of the Independent Reserve Bank that much harder. And as I said before, you know, whether it's energy bill relief, whether it's help with health, out-of-pocket costs for healthcare, medicines and GP visits, whether it is some of the changes that we've been able to make to rent assistance and other payments, what we've tried to do is to recognise the pressure that so many people are under and to do something about it without blowing the budget.
We're going to get to all of that tonight. We'll hear now from Gary Azar.
It used to be possible to raise a family and purchase a home on one income. Mr. Treasurer, that's no longer an option for a lot of us in Western Sydney. Between my wife and I, we have 3 incomes, just trying to keep up with all the soaring bills and groceries. How many incomes can you see families needing in future generations?
Yeah, I think your question springs really from 3 realities. The first one is a lot of people are working multiple jobs to try and make ends meet. I know that things are expensive in Western Sydney. I was in Dundas today talking about our energy bill relief. That's the first reality. More people are doing that. The second reality is that wages have been too stagnant for too long in our economy. One of the big reasons that we have the economic plan that we do is because we want to get wages moving in a more meaningful way again, because for the best part of a decade, wages have been stagnant for a whole range of reasons. And the third reality is that these cost of living pressures, which are coming at us from around the world and from around the country, are being increasingly felt around the kitchen table. And that does motivate our economic plan, and our budget was part of the economic plan. And one of the things that we're seeing after less than 12 months in office, almost 12 months in office, is we have been able to shift the needle on wages growth. One of the things that I'm proudest of in the economy is that we now have wages growing the quickest that they have in aggregate since 2012. They're forecast to grow next year at the fastest rate since about 2009. And I know that isn't felt evenly across the workforce or across our economy. Some parts of the economy are doing better than others when it comes to wages. But what we've tried to do, supported an increase to the minimum wage. We've got a big pay increase for aged care workers who need and deserve it. We've got a whole bunch of cost of living measures around early childhood education and in other ways, which is to try and recognise the pressures that you've described.
None of that, though, from your question, is helping you, Gary, is it? I mean, when you say 3 incomes, it means you're working 2 jobs, and your wife's working a job?
We both have full-time employment, both of us, and I've got another job as well.
And it's still hard to get by. Where's the biggest hit to the budget at the moment?
Well, the biggest hit for us is we have 2 children in childcare, 5 days a week for both of them, and it's, like $380 a week. It's a big hit, and we're part of the we're what everybody's talking about. We just came off a 2% interest rate.
That was fixed.
That was fixed, and we just jumped.
So now you're
into
at the mercy of these rises.
Well, now we're at like 5.2, so it's huge. And what else do you do? You go to uni, you do what you're supposed to do, but you just keep working. Just time poor.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to get better.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, I can tell from the way that you're talking about these pressures how hard you're working for your family, and I acknowledge that and I salute that genuinely. And when it comes to early childhood education, this is one of the big things that we're trying to help with. We do understand, particularly families with little kids, that the early childhood education budget or the costs of it are substantial. And so on the 1st of July, one of the biggest initiatives that we had actually in the October budget but comes in on the 1st of July is to try and help you a bit with those childcare costs.
Gary is precisely the people that Peter Dutton talks about, isn't it, when he talks about the working poor, the people who are carrying a mortgage, working with kids and are seeing themselves going backwards. To go to Gary's original question, we know the 1-income family is well in the past. Is even 2 incomes not enough now? Gary's question was how many incomes is it going to take?
No, I understand Gary's point of view, and
is 2 not enough? Is that the reality?
Well, our aspiration is for people who work hard, like Gary obviously does. They should be able to provide for their loved ones on a decent salary. And so much of what motivates our economic plan and the budget, both budgets, frankly, that I've handed down as Treasurer, is to try and get wages moving again. We're seeing the welcome beginnings of that. And at the same time, we're trying to provide some help with childcare or other costs, which are hard for people to meet in the current economic climate.
Good luck, Gary. Good luck with
Gary.
you and your family. We're going to go to Jessica Blowers now.
Hi, Dr. Chalmers.
Hi.
I'm a single mum of 1 child who turns 8 at the end of August, at which time I will be put onto JobSeeker. Your government has announced that the age limit of eligibility for the single parent pension will be raised to 14 from September. That's a whole month. I won't be able to pay my rent because the payment of JobSeeker won't be enough to cover it. So I'd like to know what measures the government has in place to bridge the gap that I and other parents in similar situations will find ourselves.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your question. I mean, you're really the reason why we are lifting the age from 8 to 14. And, this is something that we were very keen to do in the budget because we recognise the extra pressure that you're under as a single mum. And I pay tribute to Anthony Albanese and the Minister Amanda Rishworth for pushing this change that we all support, because we understand that aid is too soon for someone in your situation to go from parenting payment single onto job seeker. And what we've tried to do is to bring that change in as soon as possible. We think September is the soonest that we can do it. I understand that that means a few weeks for you going from the current payment onto job seeker and back onto single parenting payment. I'd love to avoid that if we could. But what we're trying to do is provide this extra assistance, about an extra $177 a fortnight from memory for about 57,000 single parents, almost all of them mums. Try and provide that extra assistance that you need and deserve. If we could avoid those couple of weeks, we would, but September's the best we can do.
What are you going to do for that month, Jessica?
I'm not sure what I'm expected to do. At the moment, my entire pension is my rent. I live off family tax benefit A and B,
Yeah,
right? A fortnight.
understood.
My rent's just gone up from $900 a fortnight to $960 a fortnight.
Yeah,
What am I going to do?
yeah. So the two
What is my choice
Yeah.
other than I am doing my best to get a job so that I can keep a house over my daughter's head?
Yeah.
When I'm applying for the jobs, I'm faced with being told that more than 100 other candidates have applied for the same jobs. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to compete against 100 other people for one job. And regardless of that, I don't have anywhere to go because I'm already paying my entire pension in rent.
Yeah,
Everywhere else in Sydney is comparable to that, right? So for 4 weeks, I just don't know what that looks like for me. And I don't know what that looks like for others in my position. And I want my government to have a strategy in place for that gap to be bridged. This is your policy. This is something that you can absolutely get through and have it pass legislation. It just needs to be thought all the way through.
yeah. Yeah, thank you. Well, we do have a strategy to help, and it will come in from September. But before that, there's also, if you live in New South Wales, up to $500 for energy bill relief. There's also the biggest increase to Commonwealth rent assistance in, I think, 3 decades. I understand genuinely that you are under the pump.
Even that rent relief, sorry, Treasurer, it doesn't come in until September.
Yeah.
So even there is a gap where people, and Jessica, so sorry for what you're going through, and as you recognise, there are so many others going through it as well.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And that's really, so much of what we tried to do on Tuesday night was to provide extra help for people in your situation. And I do genuinely understand that you would rather that help sooner. September, from our point of view, was the soonest that we could do that. The parenting payment single is an important change, but not the only one that you will benefit from. Energy bill relief, Commonwealth rent assistance, cheaper medicines as well. But I understand that you're under pressure. I can hear it in your voice and I can see it in how proud your daughter is of you for raising it as well. And we will be there for you and do what we can to help you.
I'm wondering how you approach this, Treasurer, because we seem to be working not just in a 2-geared economy, but there are multiple gears to this now, multiple levels. On the one hand, you bring down a budget surplus, which was surprising and welcome. You're banking that because we're going to go into deficit. We're told that we have full employment. We're going to get to the question of bringing in more migrants a little bit later. But people are not feeling this. They're not seeing an economy that's in surplus. They're not seeing an economy with full employment. 100 people turning up for a job when Jessica goes looking for a job. How do we account for this difference between what is felt and what we are told?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And I know when people hear that the budget this year, 2022-23, is expected to be in surplus, that's hard to square with the fact that the budget gets tougher after that. Some of the structural pressures on the budget get more intense rather than ease after that. But also, I genuinely understand that when people hear that news, they want to know, what does it mean for them? And what I've tried to do as the Treasurer, what the government has tried to do under Anthony's leadership, is to see the economy in people-facing terms. To understand that when we can afford to provide a bit more help for people, that we should do that. That we don't have to choose between managing the budget in a responsible way and having the heart to help people who are especially vulnerable, whether it's people on low and fixed incomes or even right through middle Australia. And what we could afford to do in this budget was to help people with bulk billing and Medicare, to help people with their out-of-pocket medicine costs as well, energy bill relief, Commonwealth rent assistance, an increase in the base rate to a number of payments. And all of these things are about demonstrating that managing the budget in a responsible way, and a surplus for this year if it eventuates, is not an end in itself. It's the foundation from which we can help people and invest in your future.
Just quickly, Jessica, is there any chance of going to your landlord and maybe seeking some assistance or a bit of relief for that month?
I find that a bit awkward because the landlord actually lives next door. So, and it's through a real estate agent, and I haven't broached it yet. But if it came to it, but I don't want that on my name.
No, sure.
I didn't stop paying rent the entire COVID situation.
You're looking for work.
I don't have a bad renting name, and I don't want anything on my ledger that says skipped out on 4 weeks.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
understand.
Like, even under agreement.
Yeah.
I want to keep being able to pay my rent.
Yeah. What's your daughter's name?
Ivy.
Ivy. Thanks for coming in. Look after Mum. Good luck with that as
Thanks.
well, and I hope that things work out, and that month you're able to work out something that just gets you over that hump.
Over the line, thank you.
Yeah,
Can I say something very quickly, Stan? Jessica, you wouldn't know this because they're behind you, but one of the great things about you raising this with us is there are student leaders behind you who are backing you in as you make some of these points, and I just wanted to acknowledge them as well.
Yeah. We are looking tonight at the whole question of people who are getting some form of government benefit or pension or job seeker and being able to work as well to supplement that. It relates to the topic of our online polls. This is what we're asking you. Should people on job seeker be able to work more hours without it affecting their payments? So you can cast your votes on the Q&A Facebook, Twitter and YouTube accounts, or the ABC News Instagram account as well. We're going to bring you those a little bit later. Let's hear now from Claire Reynolds-Mayers.
In 2021, the HECS indexation rate was 0.6% and is now going to go up to 7.1%. As a fresh graduate going into full-time work, I'm disheartened that the government is allowing us to start our lives with such a huge debt to our name that will only continue to increase. With this debt on top of the cost of living, housing and renting crisis, my question is, what will you do, if anything, to lessen the burden on us?
Yeah, thanks very much, Claire. And you've given me an opportunity to clear something up, which is around the budget, just before it and just after it. People have tried to make you believe and others believe that there's been some kind of change to the way that HECS debts are calculated. And that's not true. And for some time now, it reflects the inflation rate in the economy.
That's it, indexed.
And so it's indexed in the jargon. And that means as inflation moderates, the indexation will moderate
But it hasn't
as well.
been. That's the problem. And we've seen it go from 0.6 projected to go to 7.1% from June 1. So if you're carrying a HECS debt from university, you're paying 7.1% more for that.
No, I understand.
How is that fair?
I understand Claire's question. And when inflation moderates, the indexation will moderate as well.
Why isn't it just frozen? If you leave university and you've studied and you walk away with, for argument's sake, a $50,000 HECS debt, why don't you pay back the $50,000? Why is it indexed? Why are you still paying more in the years ahead? Because that's going to affect you getting a mortgage.
No, I understand.
Going to float. Why don't you just freeze
Well,
it?
because it loses its value over time. And right throughout government, a whole bunch of payments in both directions are indexed. And this is one of a number of ways that inflation, which is unacceptably high and will be too high for too long, impacts on people's financial arrangements, whether they're graduates or not. What we're trying to do is to help existing students in other ways, Commonwealth rent assistance, increase to the base rate of Austudy and youth allowance. And for people who are on low and fixed incomes, we're trying to provide energy bill relief and some of these other cost of living measures that we've been talking about. The HECS system works that you repay it at a certain level. It's $48,000 at the moment. It's about to go up on the 1st of July to about $51,000, a new threshold, which is also indexed. But we haven't changed the way that we've calculated this, and when inflation moderates, so will the indexation on HECS.
Does that help you, Claire?
Because I calculated it, and in the next financial year for 2024, I guess, I'm going to be paying $2,900 just to the government, like from the indexation rate. And with my salary at the moment, I would only be able to pay $1,180 in the next financial year. So I wouldn't even be paying back my loan. I would just be paying the government. And then that's only going to keep increasing.
Yeah, but hopefully so will your salary, so will your wages. And for a really long time now, we haven't changed anything about this, for a really long time now, it's called an income contingent loan. The more that you earn, the more you pay back a part of the cost of your education. That's a system which has been supported for some time now by both sides of politics. I do understand that people don't love the idea of indexation when inflation is high. And I don't love high inflation either. That's why a big part of the budget was designed to address it. But when inflation moderates, so will the indexation. And when your when your salary goes up as a graduate, as it will, then you will pay back some of the cost of your education that made that possible.
It's such a difficult, and I'm sure people out there are trying to work their way through all of this, to try to understand the various levers of the economy, because you're saying when inflation comes down, so will the indexation on the HECS loan. The cost of bringing inflation down is increased interest rates hitting the families of people like Gary. You hope inflation comes down, but it couldn't. It may go the other way. It may go the other way. We've seen the impact of the war in Ukraine. We see the unexpected things that happen. We know the United States is still potentially in an inflationary cycle. We know that interest rates potentially can keep going up in the US, and that can export inflation as well. So what you're telling people here is to take you on hope while they're actually having to dip into the money they have just to get by.
Oh, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we're trying to provide some assistance to take some of the edge off these cost of living pressures. That's not hope, that's reality. That's budgeted for in the budget across all of the different ways that I responded to Devon's question, Gary's question and Jessica's question. The budget tries to provide some relief from these cost of living pressures right throughout Middle Australia and including the most vulnerable people at the same time as we invest in the future. Now, we expect inflation will moderate. It's already come off a peak at Christmas time. We'd like it to moderate faster. That's the truth of it, because it is putting people under pressure. Our job is to take as much of the edge off that as we can without adding to those inflationary pressures. You're right, Stan, to say that to some extent we're hostage to international developments, but we also need to make sure that we're doing what we can at home, and that's what we're doing in this budget.
We're going to have a little embarrassed Jim moment now and take Jim back in time. We've got a photo of Jim from when he was at university. It's a very long head. That's grunge rocker.
The ears are a real giveaway, aren't they?
If you look at that photo and look at the trajectory of your life, and you come out of a battling family, a working class family, a working class neighbourhood, and if you look at the trajectory of your life, and here you are sitting here as Treasurer, how much more difficult is it today for that Jim to get where you are?
Well, I think it is difficult for people from...
More difficult now than it was for when you were 18?
Well, I don't know if I can judge that. I mean, I acknowledge and understand that, governments of all political persuasions at all levels need to make the kind of good fortune that I've had available to more people. Yeah, that is, in lots of ways, that's my reason for being. I want it to be possible for people from any kind of suburb in this country to do well. You know, around that age, when I started thinking about getting involved in politics, I had a modern history teacher who showed me what was possible, and I come from a community where if you've got the capacity to speak up for other people, you've got a responsibility to do that. And really the whole reason I'm here with you all on a Monday night is because I want there to be more opportunities for more people in more corners of the country, including suburbs like the ones that I knocked around in as a kid. Mm.
Next, we have a video question. It comes from David Fowles. We're just waiting for David's question to come through. I think it'll be rolling through about now. Here we go.
When the vast majority of taxpayer-funded welfare payments are going towards private rent, why are we giving any tax breaks at all to landlords and people who own multiple properties? Is this just a giant rort in favour of wealthy landowners?
I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is because, you know, just like the rest of the budget, you need to find a way to support the different choices that people make with their investments or in other ways. So we haven't contemplated changing, for example, negative gearing in this budget. It wasn't something that we put forward on last Tuesday night. But what we have done is to try and make it easier for people to pay their rent. As I said before, I think in response to Jessica's question, you know, we increased Commonwealth Rent Assistance, not because we think that will make all of the pressures in the rental market disappear, but because it will provide a bit of help for people.
Which applies to people, to be clear, who are receiving a government benefit. They'll get a 15% increase in that rental assistance.
Correct.
But why wouldn't the landlord raise their rent by 15%? And we know that that's happening.
Well, I'm glad you raised that, Stan, because obviously this is something that we grappled with when we came to this decision. And the advice that we got was that most of the increase in rent assistance would find its way into the pockets of the renter, which is our objective. But let me put it another way. We have low vacancy rates and high rents in our rental market, not because Commonwealth Rent Assistance is too generous. We have these pressures in our rental market because we don't have enough homes. And that's what motivates all of our efforts when it comes to housing supply. You know, whether it's the Housing Australia Future Fund that we're trying to get through the Parliament, whether it's the increase in the cap for community housing providers, you know, whether it's the Housing Accord, where I've brought the states and territories and the building industry and the big investors together, whether it's the new tax breaks in the budget on Tuesday night for build-to-rent properties, including one that I visited in Brisbane on Friday, so that there's more affordable homes near where the jobs and opportunities are being created. There's 5 or 6 different things that we're trying to do in the housing market to boost supply at the same time as we provide a bit of help for people in the rental market.
David's question went to fairness, though, didn't it? Because he says, why are people with multiple homes who are making money out of this housing market given a tax break? And you said before you had no plans to tackle things like negative gearing. Why not? And would you visit that in the future? Because in 2019, Bill Shorten took that to the electorate, lost an election. Are you just gun shy, or are you going to revisit that?
No, we've just found other ways to boost supply in the housing market, particularly affordable rental properties, and we found another way to support people who are facing high and rising rents in the context of really low vacancy rates. We've got other priorities in housing. We're trying to get them through the Parliament. We love the support of the Coalition and or the Greens in doing that, and we're not getting it. But we want to build more homes. We want to make them more affordable, and we're helping people with rent, and that's been our focus.
Let's stay on the question of rent. We'll have a question now from Charlotte Feather.
I'm a 16-year-old student who is currently living with currently renting with my family of 6, my mum being a single parent. We were just given a 90-day eviction notice. Housing prices are going through the roof, and soon families like mine will be living in tents. We really need a permanent solution. Landlords are just evicting people just to put rent up. Lives are being put on the line. What is the Labor government going to do about this?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Charlotte, for your question. And it really comes back to the sorts of issues that I was describing to Stan and to David a moment ago. We desperately need to build more homes. And vacancy rates are incredibly low, and that means that rents are high. The three big pressures we think on inflation right now are rents, out-of-pocket health costs and electricity, and we're trying to do something about each of those three. And I hate to hear your news about the eviction notice.
And that goes to the heart of the question. Your concern right now is that you may be living in a tent. You may not have a home to live in. Isn't there something the federal government can do to bring some security and to bring some general rules across the board rather than this state-by-state approach? Some states, some territories have banned things like no grounds eviction.
Yeah.
Why can't we stabilise that and create a one system that applies everywhere?
Yeah, and that's what the Prime Minister's trying to do at National Cabinet. At the last meeting of the National Cabinet, maybe 3 or 4 Fridays ago, he put this on the agenda because he recognised, as Stan did in his contribution just then, that we are dealing with different state and territory regimes around the country. There are different regimes for renters' rights around the country, and what Anthony is trying to do is to bring that together in some kind of national scheme, recognising the powers that the states and territories have, but also recognising the leadership we can show at the national level. In addition to that, extending the housing and homelessness agreement with the states and all of the other policies I ran through a moment ago. We understand that housing affordability, and particularly rent, is in so many ways the hardest part of the pressure that people are under, and we're doing what we can to address that and alleviate that, and we need the Parliament to come on board.
We're saying this a lot tonight again, Charlotte. Good luck to you as well, and I hope the situation works out and you're able to find a place for you and your family. Six kids in the family. Yeah. Good luck with that as well.
Thanks, Charlotte.
We have a video question now from Ananya Saxena from WA.
Why are all our policies, politics and budgets catered to serving and benefiting the less fortunate? It appears to me that I would be better served by my government if I was unemployed, didn't go to university and was a single parent, rather than working a 14-hour-day corporate job funding myself, my family and my education. What's in it for me? Where's my incentive to save, invest, dream big and make a success of myself?
Well, Ananya, we recognise and support the legitimate aspirations that you have to succeed in the field that you've chosen. And in the budget, whether it's help with bulk billing and Medicare, whether it's what our energy price caps mean for moderating some of the increases in energy, there's a lot in this budget for Middle Australia. But what I wanted to pick up on, respectfully, is I do believe that we do have responsibilities to each other. And I don't think Ananya is necessarily in this basket, but there is part of our society who would prefer it if people were left to fend for themselves, if we had this kind of dog-eat-dog world where people who were down on their luck or especially vulnerable for a whole range of different reasons, and we've heard some of them tonight. I do really firmly believe that we've got responsibilities to each other and that the basis of social security, not just in our country, but in every good country, is that if you are especially vulnerable or if you need the help of the rest of us, then you should get some help. I believe that. And I believe that we can do that without diminishing the effort and the aspirations that Ananya has.
And I suppose that's the nub of the question, isn't it? at what point do you start to eat into those aspirations? At what point do people feel as if, I'm working a lot and I'm not getting much back for it? Now, of course, if you have a job and a corporate job and you can work 14 hours a day and support yourself, it's certainly a lot better situation that we've heard from some of our people in the audience today. But it does go to this sense that there is this malaise, isn't there? And there is this sense of people that even people who are in a fortunate position feel as if they're going backwards.
Yeah, I don't believe it's a zero-sum game. I don't believe that helping people who are especially vulnerable diminishes the rest of us. I think it builds us up. There is a part of our society, frankly, to call a spade a shovel, there's a part of our politics that wants to divide us against each other and diminish us and demonise people that need our help. And I think that diminishes us all. And what I would rather believe, and what I do believe, and what I think the broader Australian community believes, is that we can support Middle Australia. We will continue to do that. But we can do that in a way that shows some heart and some compassion as well. And, when we hand down a budget like we did on Tuesday night, there will be the polls and there will be the pundits. But what I really care about is whether people say at some future point that what we did was we were as responsible as we could be, we supported Middle Australia where we could, but we also recognise the responsibilities that we have to each other. And when we sit down to make budgets, Labor governments in particular, those should be the things that guide us, and those were the things that guided us in what we released on Tuesday.
Let's go to Paul Musa now.
G'day, Jim.
Hi, Paul.
Questions relating to immigration and migration. Why would we increase migration by 700,000 when we can't look after the people we have here? We've got 122,000 homeless in Australia. Australia, I'm a proud migrant, came here 60 years ago, and Australia was the lucky country. Australia still is the lucky country, but it won't stay that way unless the government does something to reassure people that they will have a home, they will have food on the table, and they will be able to raise their family in the lucky country.
Yeah, thank you.
So why, the question stands, why bring 700,000 people into Australia? And the migrants, sorry Stan, the migrants contributed greatly to Australia and continue to do that. But you yourself said we don't have enough houses, we don't have enough support structure. Now the 660 million that'll be raised by increasing the visa application, that works out around about $900 per person. Will that go to a structure? What's going to happen? Are we just going to have an influx and more pressure going on the welfare system to help people who come to us daily in tears, worried about electricity bills, worried about eviction notices, worried about day-to-day living, worried about putting food on the table? What will the government do? They're going to bring more people in?
Paul's from Parramatta Mission and works on the ground helping people in those situations. But it does go to that question. I think it's, 400,000 in 2022, 23. And it goes to that question, can we bring in more people when we're hearing the stories we're hearing tonight?
Yeah. Thanks, Paul, for your question. Thanks for your work at Para Mission as well. I was out your way this morning.
Come and see us.
That's good. Good. Do that.
And Paul, thanks for raising something which I do understand is on a lot of people's mind, and it gives me the opportunity to clear up a couple of things. First of all, the number that you're hearing about migration is a number called net overseas migration, and that isn't a government policy or a government target. It's not a floor or a ceiling. It's not something that the government determines. It basically reflects, in the aftermath of that worst phase of COVID, the students and the tourists coming back and fewer Australians leaving Australia to work overseas. And that's what's driving that bigger than usual number. But even with that rebound, it still hasn't made up the ground that we lost during COVID. And so the cumulative forecasts for this number, net overseas migration, is actually smaller than what was forecast 2 or 3 budgets ago before COVID. So that's an important piece of perspective.
But the situation we're in right now, where we're hearing stories of people who are being evicted, people who are struggling to pay the rent, the stories that we've heard there, Paul. You're working on the ground doing this.
Yep.
How can you bring in more people when people can't find homes? And you've admitted that we have to find more homes for people who are here.
Yeah. And so that's net overseas migration. There's another number, which is the permanent migration cap, which the government does set, which we've actually brought down. It was 195, we're going to make it 190,000. But your broader point still stands. You know, we want students in our economy, we want tourists supporting communities and industries right around Australia. Those are good things, but we need to find places for people to live. And whether it's...
Sorry, Jim, currently you've got students living in their study pods in the universities.
Yeah.
You've got crowding,
Yeah.
12 and 13 people in a room.
Get it.
So, you know, these are students that...
Yep.
Through COVID, lost employment, didn't get the employment back and
Yep.
are struggling.
Yep.
And that continues.
Yep. And a bit like Charlotte's question and Jessica's question as well, Paul, we need to build more homes. And when it comes to student housing, which you're right to identify, we're trying to get the investors interested in that form of housing as well, and we're prepared to help to make that attractive to them. We need to build more homes, that's understood. We need to get the infrastructure right. That's why we've locked down a $120 billion pipeline for infrastructure. We want to get more value for money on it, which is what the review is all about. And we've got to make sure that the services are there for people. And not just in some parts of Australia, but right around Australia. And that's what motivates the biggest ever new investment in bulk billing in the history of Medicare, which was also in the budget.
Are you confident you can get that housing deal through? You said before you want the support of either the Coalition or the Greens. Are you confident of this?
It's hard to predict, and that's because if you apply a rational lens to it and say, here's an opportunity to build 30,000 more social and affordable homes, including for women and children fleeing violence, our working assumption is that that is very hard for the Parliament to knock back, but they've found a way, which is very disappointing. And I'm trying to spare your audience here and around Australia from a kind of a partisan rant about this, but I find it deeply troubling and deeply disappointing that there's 30,000 homes on the table. The Parliament should get behind it.
If you're just joining us, you're watching Q&A. We're live with Treasurer Jim Chalmers. A little later, we're going to look at how the government plans to wind back the costs of the NDIS. That's a big one. We've got some quick-fire questions. Ask a politician to be disciplined here, so we need a short response so we can get through these, and then we can get to some other questions as well. But let's get to these now. Here's John Dengate.
Treasurer, given the undue influence that gambling advertising is having on a young, are you willing to gazump the opposition leader and propose a total ban on gambling advertising on radio and television?
Thanks, John. Considering it as part of a review that we already had underway before Peter Dutton's speech last week. Already banned credit cards for online gambling, already building a self-exclusion opportunity, already changing the classification when it comes to kids and gambling. Got a big agenda there, and we'd contemplate going further.
Our next one is from Patricia Pelosi.
Good evening.
Hi.
Why haven't wages in Australia gone up at a time when the economy is very strong and unemployment is at a 50-year low?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is something we grapple with a lot. For the best part of a decade, the government, by their own admission, our predecessors said that low wages growth was a deliberate design feature of their economic policy. We take a very different approach. We're already beginning to see the fruits of that. Again, as I said to Gary, not everywhere, but in aggregate, wages are moving properly again in a way that we welcome, and
Still
in a
below
way,
inflation.
and in a way that we expect to continue. Real wages have been going backwards for some time. We expect real wages growth next year when inflation moderates and this wages growth continues. But the fastest aggregate wages growth since 2012, expecting the fastest since 2009. Inflation will moderate. We want people who work hard to be able to provide for their loved ones. That's core to us putting people at the centre of our economic plan.
And our final quickfire question is a video. It comes from James Woodburn.
Rather than simply increasing the handouts to job seekers, shouldn't the government be looking at initiatives that actually activate the unemployed? Perhaps in the areas of voluntary work, where they could improve their self-esteem, gain new skills, and be contributing back to society at the same time.
Yeah, thanks, James. I don't see it as an either or. We can increase the base rate of job seeker as we have. At the same time, as we train people with foundational skills, we make it easier with cheaper childcare for people to work more and earn more if they want to, paid parental leave, our broader skills agenda, what we're doing in communities of entrenched intergenerational unemployment. All of this is about trying to find more opportunities for people to grab at a time when unemployment's at 3.5% and the economy's growing. But we can do that at the same time as we provide this increase to the base rate of job seeker, which has been a barrier. The level of job seeker has been a barrier to people looking for work. And so we can address that, and we can also do some of the things that James is proposing.
We're going to bring you the result of our online poll, which went to this issue. We asked you, should people on job seeker be able to work more hours without it affecting their payments? A resounding yes. Yeah. 3,000 people responded to this as well, and you can see the vote, 76% yes, no 15 and unsure 9. Peter Dutton's been talking about this, saying rather than just giving an increase, why not allow people to work more without it affecting their job seeker or affecting their pension? And of course the marginal tax rate is enormous on people who work to supplement what may be a government payment as well. Where do you sit on this? We're getting mixed signals from the government. It was dismissed as a thought bubble, but you've also said perhaps you'll look at it. Where are you on this?
Well, the reason we describe it as a thought bubble is because Peter Dutton hasn't been able to say how much it will cost, how many people it will impact, and our job is very different to his. My job is different to his. His job is to scratch around for something to say in budget week. He's talking about something that they had a decade in office to deal with, and I don't remember hearing anything from Peter Dutton about this before. Now we get to budget week, he's got to give a big speech, he's scratching around for a policy idea, and so we hear it. My job is different. My job is not to make announcements. My job is to make changes. Our government's job is to make changes.
But is it a good idea? We just saw the result of that poll.
Just let me finish then. And so my job is to work through all of these issues in a methodical way. And that's why we've got an employment white paper, that's why we've got big investments in foundational skills and early childhood education and paid parental leave and investments in disadvantaged communities, all of the things that we've been talking about, because we are motivated by the need to get people into work and earning more if they can. That's a big part of our agenda. It was part of our agenda before last week, during last week, and it will be after. But our job is different. It's not to kind of get through a news cycle. It's not to kind of get a little pat on the head from the Sky News After Dark crowd. That's how Peter Dutton sees his job. My job is different. It's not about issuing press releases, it's about making changes. And in order to make change that is meaningful and well considered and well thought out, you need to make sure you're examining all your options, and that's what we're doing. And if he really wants to do this, he will tell us how much it costs and who it impacts. Otherwise, I think people could be forgiven for thinking it is just a budget week thought bubble.
Although there was 3,000 people who voted in that poll, 76% saying yes, people should be able to work more and still keep job seeker. If you're looking for a pat on the head from the Q&A audience, how seriously would you take that idea, though? Is that something seriously you would consider in increasing the number of hours people can work and not affect that benefit? Well,
I guess the point I'm trying to convey to you all is that we think about all of these things, workforce incentives, training, workforce participation, all of these things. We think about these things more or less constantly. We work through them in a methodical and considered way. I've got an employment white paper coming out later in the year, and this is these sorts of issues broadly.
It's on the table, this type of issue.
It's not something that we have been specifically considering, but we have been trying to work out how do we grapple with this big challenge we have as a country, which is we've got 3.5% unemployment, but there's still pockets of Australia where people aren't accessing the opportunities of an economy that's got unemployment that low. There's a problem there. There's a disconnect there, which we are addressing in a methodical way. We've already got a big agenda, and we've got a white paper to tease out any more policies that we want to pursue.
Let's go to a question now from Julie Murphy.
Good evening. I run a support group for parents and carers of children with a disability. Now, a lot of the parents are very worried about the cuts to the NDIS, especially in relation to early intervention and children with developmental delays. Will these savings, as you call them, what will they look like, and will the funding be cut altogether?
Yeah. Was it Julia or Julie?
Julie.
Julie, thanks for your question, Julie, and thanks for your work. And for the opportunity to talk about this, because I think this is a really important issue in the budget. Our overwhelming priority is to make sure that people who are in the NDIS, the people that we designed the NDIS to help, get the care and the services and the equipment that they need and deserve. That's our priority, and daylight second. And one of the ways that we do that is we make sure that every dollar that is intended for participants in the scheme reaches participants in the scheme. And there has been fraud, and there has been ways that people are trying to make a buck out of the NDIS, and we want to try and stamp that out because every dollar that is wasted in the NDIS can't go to the people that you work with and work for, and the people I work for, frankly, in funding the scheme. And so what we've said, what Bill Shorten, the Minister, has said, and the Prime Minister, working with the states and territories, is let's see where we can address this fraud, let's see where we can address this waste that might be the NDIS, not because we want the people that you work with to get less support, on the contrary. We want them to get the support that we designed the scheme to provide.
Julie, I'm like you, sitting here and wondering how do these numbers add up? Because we look at the numbers, 17.9 billion, which you say you can get down to 1.9 billion in 4 years, and yet NDIS is growing at 14% a year. You think you can get that down, but how on earth does that add up? How do you go from 17.2 billion to 1.9 billion in 4 years?
Well, I've just been explaining to Julie
but how do you do that without cutting services? Does everyone agree that is an enormous change, isn't it? Is that the same NDIS?
Well, yeah, we're talking about delivering...
So no one's going to lose services. Julie's working with kids with disability, learning disabilities.
Learning disability,
I understand.
Cognitive, physical.
Yeah.
Is someone with ADHD going to be taken off it to get from 17.9? That is an enormous change.
Yeah, what we're trying to do here is not throw people off the scheme who need our help. What we're trying to do here is not unnecessarily hack away at the funding for the scheme. What I'm trying to say to Julie and to a lot of people who are in fairness, you know, I know that people are concerned about this. I have it raised with me in the street, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing about our country that people raise it. Our intention here is to deliver a high standard of care and service, and the way that we do that is we make sure that every dollar which is intended for participants in the scheme reaches participants in the scheme. And in order to do that, we need to tackle some of the issues that I've already run through. We can still have the scheme costs are still expected to grow substantially over time.
About
8% target.
8% rather than 14.
Yeah.
And that's what I don't understand. So just help me out here. 17.2 billion to 1.9 billion, even as it grows at 8%, and you're saying you'll get to that number and you won't take people off it. There won't be cuts to services.
Yeah.
You'll just get to that by cutting out rorts. That number doesn't add up.
Well, that's one important way that we'll go about it. Julie would understand, as you know, the people that we deal with in my electorate office understand that there is plan inflation in lots of cases where if you're going back for a plan really regularly, often that plan goes up a substantial amount each time, and so we can change the timeframes for some of that planning. We all know that the equipment, if it's got the NDIS stamp of approval, often costs many multiples of equipment that doesn't have that stamp on it. So there's another avenue that I know Bill Shorten is thinking about. We've got this review underway at the same time. The 8% target doesn't kick in till 2026. And so we have years to work with Julie and with participants in the scheme and the sector more broadly and the NDIA and others to make sure that we get it right.
Does this convince you, Julie?
Not particularly. I keep thinking about all the young children that are coming into the system in the first place, and I think that's where a lot of the drops are going to happen. I think a lot of those children, the goalposts are going to change basically.
So are you looking for a guarantee that people will not be taken off?
We're looking for a guarantee that our kids are going to be able to get the early intervention when they need it and not have to wait so long until they are into the NDIS system.
I mean, of course. I mean, the NDIS is designed by a former Labor government to provide help for the people that Julie works with and for, and that will always continue under us. And our motivation here is to not hack away at the scheme. Our motivation here is to make it as good as it can be, to provide the service and the care and the support that people need and deserve in the scheme. That's our motivation. And anybody who looks at the scheme, I don't think anybody who knows the scheme well thinks it's perfect. I think everybody understands that there are ways that we can get better value for money without jeopardising or diminishing the care that we want to provide.
Thank you, Julie. We do have a change of topic now, and here's Jonathan Chang.
Evening, Treasurer. I know you're a big hip-hop fan. The genre turns 50 years old this August and was birthed as a socio-political commentary on the stigmatized and often marginalized Black experience. What do you make of the sobering lyrics that rappers like Tupac or Chuck D from Public Enemy use? And do they, in a sense, inform the way that you would, say, write your budget?
Yeah.
Did you write your budget to Public Enemy, is what he's asking.
You'll be surprised, but some of it was written with a hip-hop soundtrack.
Was it? Which ones in particular?
I'm into the Australian rappers a bit more now. The one I listen to most when I'm doing something substantial is there's a track by Illy, which has got a Notorious B.I.G. sample in it called Same Number, Same Hood. And I listen to that a lot. I listened to that today, actually. There's a great song, Spit Syndicate. It's got a song Along the Way. The song I run to I run to the most is there's a great Briggs track, The Children Came Back. Anyone
taking the Archie Roach song and
exactly
adding,
right.
Yeah.
And anyone who can fit 3 Paddy Mills references into one track is bound to get me listening. But to answer your question more seriously, I mean, I grew up on hip hop music. For me, at the beginning, it was Run DMC and the Beastie Boys. And there are confronting lyrics in hip hop music and in rap music. There is a rawness to it, which people would recognise in their own communities. And I recognise in my community. It is kind of the soundtrack to my local area.
Did that open your eyes to things as well? Through that music? I mean, you know, I think it's a serious question too. The question about the Black experience, the marginalised experience. But even a rapper like Tupac, who I listen to, but also through my kids. But, you know, that song, Nothing to Lose. You know, I'm 13 years old, wishing I was somewhere else. Is it wrong to wish I was somewhere else? You know, pray to God doesn't listen. It's the poverty that kills you. You know, these sort of things. I mean, how did that shape you?
Yeah. Well, the Tupac song that shaped me the most was Changes. And I don't know if you know Change. I think that's the best rap song of all time.
Verse 2 gets me all the time.
What's that?
Verse 2, I see no changes, all I see is racist faces.
Yeah,
Place take me
right.
to racist.
Right, and we've got to change the way we eat, we've got to change the way we treat each other. I mean, there's amazing lyrics in that track. I like the bluntness of it. I like blunt speak.
For a politician.
Yeah. Well, I get accused of that from time to time for being a bit too blunt. I think it is really powerful. And it was formative in growing up. I still listen to it now. I find it hard to share it with my kids because some of it is a bit too blunt and the language is a bit blue. But I can see the way that people latch onto it because it's real.
Thank you for your question. Thank you for all of your questions tonight. That's all we have time for. Thanks again to our guest, the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers. thank you again for all of your stories, your questions, Jessica. All the best. And that was a wonderful invitation over here from Parramatta Mission. So I hope something works out with that as well. Charlotte, good luck to you as well in the situation you're in. I hope that you find a home for you and your family. Next week, I'll be with you live from Melbourne. A year on from the federal election, we're going to be joined by an all-political panel. That good? It is good because they're actually the class of 2022. Labor member for Higgins, Michelle Ananda-Rajah, Liberal member for Flinders, Zoe McKenzie, Independent senator for the ACT, David Pocock, senator from the Jackie Lambie Network, Tammy Terrell, and Greens member for Griffith, Max Chandler Mather. So the newbies next week, one day they may be sitting here where the Treasurer is. Head to our website to register to be in the audience. Until then, thank you once again for all of those questions and stories. Have a good night.